Hi, welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast about how AI is changing media, news, and communication. I'm your host, Pete Pachal. I covered tech for a long time as a journalist, and now I have deep conversations with the media people, the builders, and the creators who are all answering the question, how will we get information in the future? And how will that transform journalism and the business of media? My guest today is Paul Gewuerz, host of Small Press, Big Ideas. That's a podcast about local news in the United States and the people trying to make it work. Paul talks to publishers, editors, entrepreneurs, and local news operators about what's working, what isn't, and the future of community journalism. I was recently a guest on Paul's show, and we had a lively conversation about AI and local news and search and trust and all the things. So I wanted to, this time out, flip the microphone and get his view from the front lines of local media. So because local news really is where a lot of the AI debate gets very real. So these are organizations, they're usually understaffed, underfunded, but they are very deeply tied to their communities. AI could potentially help them cover more ground and build more products and reach new audiences, save time, but it could also flood the zone with cheap content and make trust even harder to earn. So we're going to talk about what Paul's hearing from small publishers and how local newsrooms are actually using AI. Where's the risk? Where's the opportunity? And what does community journalism look like if AI becomes part of the basic infrastructure of media? So before we get into it, just 1 second, please just take a second, 1 second to rate or review the show. Really, it would help a lot. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, that would mean maybe leaving a 5-star review and maybe a nice comment. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you don't mind. Those things really do help people find the show. All right, housekeeping over. Paul, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Pete, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you again. It's been
likewise,
a few
man.
months or a few lifetimes in the AI world, media
Right?
world. So, yeah.
Totally. I think it's like
good to be here, though. Yeah.
500 Claude download versions ago.
Right.
So before we get into it, I want to get into AI and all the stuff around community journalism and local news that I talked about just there. But let's talk a little bit about you. Like, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your history, your background, and like what brought you to covering local media in this way.
Yeah. Love to. So I've said, if anybody listens to my podcast, I've said it a million times. I'm not a journalist. I don't come from a journalism background. I've always had an interest in it. Like in high school, I was really attracted to, I guess, more like the gonzo journalism. I was a big fan of Hunter S. Thompson.
Sure. We all were.
Of course. Yeah. The legend. I went to school for journalism for a few years. Came out of school in 2008 is when I graduated. So not a great time to enter the job market. I went into an entirely different field. I actually worked for a beer distributor for about a decade.
I feel like that would have been great in 2008.
It was great.
To drink their sorrows away.
The beer industry does good in a good economy and better in a bad one. Because that's kind of the internal line. Anyway, I worked there. Big corporation, household name for a long time. Kind of got just frustrated with the large corporate structures dealing with. I've been told that I have a good voice, so I actually got into narrating audiobooks. I did that freelance for a few years, left my corporate gig. Eventually got out of that freelance feast or famine kind of mindset, and I'm a big audio guy. Started producing podcasts for clients, for social media influencers, for lack of a better term, content creators, etc. A few years back, I was approached by a local news outlet up in the Seattle area to produce a podcast for them. And it kind of reignited that interest in journalism and specifically local journalism. And we put together a podcast for them. I got really interested in it. I wanted to work more in the space, started reaching out to more publishers, launched my own podcast, Small Press, Big Ideas. And I've just tumbled down a rabbit hole of media and specifically local journalism. Just had a crash course on it over the last few years. I went into it just as like a business interest. I'm like, oh, this is an interesting kind of niche to target. And then after talking to folks, realize how vital it is to a democracy and a community. There's studies out there that show when a local news source disappears in it's referred to as a news desert. in an area.
Mm,
The corruption and the financial misdealings at like the city, county level, they skyrocket because there's no accountability.
mm.
So it's literally besides just the need for good quality local news and information, it's a vital thing to our society. So anyway, didn't expect to tumble down that rabbit hole, but that's where I'm at. Today, I host the Small Press Big Ideas podcast, and I have a company called LocalPod.co, where we specialize in producing podcasts for mostly all digital publishers, but specifically my heart's with the local media operators and helping them grow audience and revenue from there. So yeah,
Nice.
that's pretty much my story in a nutshell, I'd say.
Yeah, I feel like with local media, they, there's obviously like networks and groups of that cover certain regions and that sort of thing. But generally, like, I don't know if there's a lot of communication outside of those things. Like I feel like your podcast really provides a good service of you know, giving some conversation on that layer about that layer of
Hmm.
media. Everyone sort of talks about local media in almost like this arm's length third person. Well, it would be nice if we had more,
Hmm.
and it's like,
Hmm.
but there's not. I feel like the actual like newspapers are rarely part of that discussion. It's usually just people kind of opining on them, or whatever they are, not necessarily newspapers. But so I think you're providing, like I say, a valuable service there in sort of giving folks an outlet. Also, people love to talk about their communities and themselves. And I think there's a lot, as you found, I'm sure there's tons of unique stories out there in terms of, success in journalism.
Yeah, it's a big topic. More than when I started the podcast, I was like, maybe I can get like 10 people that I did some research on. I can get to come on, and I'm 120 episodes deep now, and just still have people lined up.
Nice.
There's a lot of interesting stories out there. I had Stephen Waldman on the podcast early on from Rebuild Local News. They're out of Washington, an advocacy group to strengthen local news. And I think he's the one, he put it the best in terms of, local media sustainability. He said, it's like there's a forest fire, the last 20 years of Google and Meta and everything that's kind of decimated local media industry. And there's a lot of these little green shoots and sprouts coming up, but you wouldn't know it from looking at like the side of a mountain. But if you look close, there's a lot of, and that's kind of what the podcast has shown me. There's a lot of cool stories and innovations happening. It's just not necessarily the scale we need it to happen at. So
Hmm.
yeah, I kind of went off on a tangent there, but that's kind of
Yeah, no, I'd
what
love
I've
to hear
taken away
about some
from.
of those. What are you thinking about? Anything specific when you're thinking about the promising
Oh,
things that are being seeded right now?
I mean, I've had a lot of people on the show, and every organization is different. Every community is different. And this is a huge country. It's mostly based in the US. I've had a couple folks from uh, the UK and Canada on, but primarily the US. It's just a huge region. Every area is different. But I mean, I've had nonprofits. I had somebody on from, I'm going to blank on the name. I don't have it pulled up right now. In
That's
South
okay.
Carolina. And they started, he left the legacy newspaper in town, started basically like a glorified Substack. And,
Mm.
3, 4 years later, they're a nonprofit, mostly work on sponsorships. And I think he has a newsroom of 4 or 5 people, 5 or 6 full-time people now. It's like this vital thing to the community. Uh,
That's great.
for a Canadian one, the Green Line up in Toronto is really interesting, founded by Anita Lee, also on the podcast.
Hmm.
I just like the design. They've basically designed the Green Line as very social media native. Everything is very visually appealing. Even just like their website, just the functionality of it. It's not what you think of when you think of like a newspaper site. And they're about literally they just do these guides. I think 1 or 2 a quarter, these in-depth guides on housing, you know, uh where to sorry, housing, the job market, all this stuff. And
Yeah,
they're very practical use cases. And it's not just like an article you'd read. It's a different format. And they're crushing it.
that's
Those 2 come
awesome.
to mind. I could go on and on and on. There's a lot of them. I should have gotten a list up before I hopped on
No, you're
here.
good.
But yeah.
I'm glad you brought up Anita Lee's operation. I used to work with her at
Oh,
Mashable,
really?
actually. Yeah,
Really? Yeah.
yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's good to hear about like good people doing stuff that's interesting and successful.
Hmm.
We talked a little bit about some specific stuff, but actually, why don't we zoom out a bit? Like, give me like what your broader perspective is now about local media. Now that you've talked to over 120 people and heard so many stories, like what do you now understand about local news that you didn't when you started the show?
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you said that everybody kind of holds it at arm's length, and they're like, "Yeah, we need more. We need good local journalism." And almost everybody that says that, well, I'm not going to pay for it. That's the reality. I think this is a separate conversation. I think there was a mistake made by the news media industry early on in the internet of just putting everything up and people got used to
Yeah.
that. And it's very hard to walk that back.
Oh
Anyway,
man, and we're reaping the winds of that in
yes,
AI now that you think
yeah.
about it. But anyway, go on.
Not that anybody knew that at the time. I want to
Sure.
don't want to discredit anybody. But anyway, what I've seen is that is true. It is a hard business to operate, especially where it's needed the most in rural America. I'm in Western Colorado, a town of 20,000, which is the biggest city for anywhere around my region. And I think a lot of folks on the coast forget just how huge the country is. And it's just a very difficult business to operate on a smaller scale where it's needed. Um, it's a if on the jujitsu belt level, it's I don't know the color of the belts, but it's high. It's closer to the black belt level of business to operate versus something with higher margins and everything.
Mm.
Combine that with the fact that a lot of the smaller outlets are mission driven. They're journalists. They
Mm.
want to serve the community, and that they're not business people. And there is the people that get into it, the journalists, because a lot of them are smaller operations. You came up in media. There used to be a firewall between the business side and the
Sure.
editorial side. And a
Very
lot of
much.
that needs to be dissolved, and people on either side need to think like the other side. That's the thing I've seen is business operators will come in and they don't know how to do good journalism. A lot of people that have, the organization has kind of fallen apart around them, and they're a one man or one woman job running a whole thing, and they have to report on everything and, get revenue coming in the door. It's a challenge. It's a very, very complicated challenge. And I think about it a lot every day, and I don't have any great answers. But, there's also amazing people doing amazing things out there. Yeah. Does that kind of answer that
Yeah,
question? I feel like
for
I'm
sure. And I
straying. Yeah.
definitely take that to heart in terms of like the smaller the organization, the more everyone I think is mindful of how the business is doing and how you're actually succeeding, right? Like I
Hmm.
feel like again, not to, I'm sure neither of us mean to sort of disparage the spirit of the church state separation, which is very good, has good
Hmm.
roots of like not having business interests affect the journalism, and I think that's we both believe in that, but at the same time, um, there has to be a strategy to running the business, and sure if you're News Corp, that a lot of that's you can kind of wall off. I mean, maybe it shouldn't be, but it is like strategists, executives, et cetera, sort of making broader strategic decisions. But if you're a team of like what you were just talking about, 3 or 4 people, 5
Hmm.
people, I mean, everything is strategic at that point to some extent,
Hmm.
right? Again, not at all endorsing like, oh, you should have these commercial interests affect actual journalism, but like some of the broader directions you go, all these other things, like everyone's going to have a little bit of more than a little bit of a voice in that when you
Hmm.
get, and then of course local media there's like it's usually under like you know a dozen. I mean, it depends on what you're. I mean, it depends on how small the place is or how big the
Yeah.
market is. But it's
Yeah.
obviously when you talk local and bigger cities, sure, you have bigger newsrooms, but it's it just becomes especially today everything seems sort of have every decision almost seems a bit existential.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it is very much. And the kind of metaphor or way I kind of think about it sometimes, the local news industry is um, going back into the 20th century. I'll talk about newspapers because that's what was kind of the main source of local news
Sure.
forever. I feel like newspapers and local media has gone the way of the music industry. Whereas
Hmm.
the music industry, the big record companies in the 60s, 70s, 80s, they were absolutely printing money with records, cassettes, CDs, and they were just living this absolute flush life. And then the internet came along, kind of democratized everything, Napster and
Yeah.
LimeWire and everything came along. And then the internet came along, disrupted that business model, and now it's a very different, much smaller business
Mm.
that's much more spread out. I think the same thing has happened with news, where I think newspapers, I think it was a moment in time where it was this amazing business model over through the 1900s where, they had classified ads. They had it was the source of advertising revenue. It was and then once again, the internet came along with Google and Craigslist and everything, and upended that.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that it's never going back to the way it was, it's just things evolve. They're constantly in flux. It's just going to change, and it's a matter of learning how to deal with that and adapt to the new realities, the new environment.
Yeah, the music analogy is interesting because obviously the music industry was forced to figure out that that selling
Hmm.
songs for 99 cents, at least at the time for the 2000s, was kind of the future. And then they had to adapt to this new business model. And it's interesting that it was forced upon them by tech. And now, like there's a lot of parallels here. But I kind of wonder in terms of like the media and sort of strategic planning back then, I think you could certainly see their to your point of the classified revenue, which was substantial and then went to zero. If they had planned around that, if that could have made a difference. Because I see in today's media, specifically with AI, there is a lot of strategic planning around like Google Zero. It hasn't happened yet. Obviously, Google isn't dead in terms of a search engine, and the 10 blue links still exist, at least for a while. But people have been planning around Google Zero for a while. If people had started planning around classified zero in 2000, would there have been quite the apocalypse there is? I don't know. I feel like the media, at least at this point in 2026, has learned so many hard lessons over the last couple of decades where we've got this ingrained survival instinct now, I feel like, about it.
Hmm.
But I don't know. Are you seeing evidence of that at the local level? And guess how are they surviving?
I mean, to be honest, there are a lot of there's a lot of organizations that, in my opinion, have not changed enough. They're
Hmm.
still relying on advertising and sponsors and scraping by and doing what they've always done. That's with any industry or any company. There's always going to be, but the ones that are thriving are doing something unique. They're building a local brand. And you came on my podcast and you talked about how you think it's going to be a huge boon for PR firms over the next couple of years. Anybody
Sure.
that can generate trust and reliability in an age where anybody can produce anything with AI. So if you can build a brand, get something that gets people excited and generate that trust in a community, those are the ones doing a really good job. I thought of a few more examples when you asked me before, of some examples. There's two that are really similar. The Big Bend Sentinel in Marfa, Texas,
Okay.
and Island Port. There's one up in Maine. I also interviewed him recently. They're all mixed up in my head. Sorry. I'll go with
It's okay.
Max down at the Big Bend Sentinel.
I thought you were going to
Max,
say the Parliament Sentinel, so I could Ben in Parliament, and no, that's never mind. Bad
right?
joke.
Very different. Far west Texas, along the Rio Grande. Very different than London.
Hmm.
But so what Max Cabot, who came on the podcast, and his wife did down there, is they moved to Marfa. There was an elderly couple running the Big Bend Sentinel, the local company and print newspaper, and they wanted to retire. And Max and his wife purchased it from them. And what they did is there was a huge print shop in downtown Marfa they did not need that big of a print shop. Everything is digital online now with a print product also. They basically cut that in half. They turned half of this old, really cool building print shop into a cafe, company or community space and event center and like
Nice.
arts center,
Okay.
with all the profits feeding into the journalism. So I mean, and it's become like an absolute hub. I think it's a town of 2,000 people, Marfa,
Hmm.
and the Big Bend Sentinel, the combined cafe, event space, and newspaper. I think he employs like 8 or 10 full-time people there now, just through
Wow.
this.
Not
And the
bad for
similar, yeah,
yeah,
yes,
an area like
similar
that.
with the gentleman up in Maine. They have a cafe. They were featured on CBS Sunday
Yeah.
Morning, actually, where they have also a cafe and a bed and breakfast tied to like the upstairs is the newspaper basically, and it all kind of
Wow.
feeds into that kind of. And it's a community center. People want to air their grievances on city council, and they come down and have pancakes and talk to the journalists about it every Tuesday at 10 or whatever it is. So
Nice. Is that
there's
an
cool stuff like that.
opportunity for sponsorships and stuff like that? I would feel like, having an event space. I mean, events is like the future, right? That's, for
Right.
media right
Yeah.
broadly. I mean, obviously it's, one of many business models, but it's a growing one.
Hmm.
And it sounds like this might be a doorway to that at the local level, like, converting some
Yeah,
space to some coffee. And, obviously it's probably mostly used for meetups, like you say, but you could have like a sponsored night and,
yeah,
do
yeah.
something related to your
Yeah.
publication.
Yeah,
Yeah.
my friend Paul Myers, shout out Paul. I don't know if he listens to this one or not, but he listens to mine a lot, and we talk a lot. He's in the Central Valley of California, and they do a speaking of events, he's one of my favorites. They do a brews and news night, I think every month
Mhm.
or quarter, where
Nice.
they basically rent out the local microbrewery, and you get one free pint of beer, and the price is your email address for their newsletter list, basically. So
All
that's not
right.
necessarily a sponsored thing, but it's subscribers
No,
and
that's
audience like that.
yeah.
I think it's a cool idea. Yeah,
It's not direct revenue, but hey, whatever grows the audience.
yeah, yeah.
That's really cool. So, Paul, we're about 20 minutes in, and we haven't talked about AI yet. I feel
I
like
know,
I'm
crazy.
getting, someone in my ear insisting that I
Hmm.
get to the machines. So tell me, like you talked about some success stories, like how much AI is going on at the local level, and what are some of the most um, interesting use cases that you've come across?
So there's a couple that almost everyone that comes on the podcast mentions, and that is the specific tool that every journalist and every entrepreneur that runs a local news thing that comes on is Otter.ai,
Hmm.
which is just a transcription service. It seems simple and it seems obvious. Everyone by name swears by Otter for just transcribing meeting notes, interviews, city council meetings, etc. That's like a kind of obvious one, but it seems to be used a lot. Another trend I've seen on the show is just normal old ChatGPT being used for just ideas for almost nobody, I should say, is using it to actually write content, at least not
Hmm.
unchecked, but to just
Of course.
generate like headline ideas or title line ideas seems to be a very popular thing people are using. I'm bullish on a lot of different I'm an optimist and I'm a, I guess, techno forward. I don't know the term. I'm a fan of AI. I think it can be
Right.
used. I think it's
AI
a tool.
forward.
AI forward.
That's what the
There we
kids
go.
love. The kids in
Yeah.
marketing anyway, so I
Do
don't know
they?
if we wanna
Okay.
learn that much.
Yeah. And I mean, I think there's a lot of interesting use cases for just I think a lot of local news publishers, and I'm straying a bit here, I think they're all scarred from the rise of Google
Sure.
and the internet and Craigslist, all the stuff we talked about. And these big tech companies came in and basically hollowed them out over the last 20 years. And then I think a lot of them view AI as like an extension of that. Like, oh, this is going to be the final blow. This is it. This is going to do us in. And I fundamentally disagree with that.
Hmm.
I think it's the as opposed to the Empire Strikes Back. I think it's the Return of the Jedi. The AI tools. I think it's going to enable so much more time for these for in on the back end just boring business use cases. Um, reducing newsroom time, working on boring stuff nobody wants to do that needs to get done, is going to enable a lot more good reporting to get done. And I think there's business models that have been tried by local media operators in the past that are going to be possible now. Like for
Hmm.
instance, the idea of operating as a local news outlet and like a marketing firm, like for local businesses. Some people have seen some
Hmm.
success with that, doing marketing for local companies, but that's
Okay.
like that's like a whole adding a whole other business to your newsroom.
Can you double click on the marketing name of that? Are you
Yeah, yeah,
talking
yeah.
about like a publication that might with a team that might kind of like also do branded work essentially
Yes.
for you're in the got it. Okay.
Yes. It's
That
something
makes
that's been
sense.
floated around in the space for a long time over the last 10 years probably with some success there, but once again, it's a hard business to run. That adds another layer of complexity on top of all that. I
Yeah,
think,
and
and I
it
don't
kind of
know that
speaks
we're
to what I was saying earlier about the church state separation. Whereas
yes.
at a major pub, obviously you're going to have different teams and it's going
Hmm.
to be whole different operations. You get local, you get like, I mean, you're gonna have to put on different hats and you're gonna have to figure
Yes.
it out.
Yeah.
That's just, the reality, I think.
Yeah. For example, I'm mostly a one man show for my business, and I need to get a new landing page up for a segment of my localpod.co. And A year or two ago, that would have been like 3 day, if I'm being honest, like a
Mhm.
week of my time to get it polished and everything. I can do that in a half a day now, with some of these
Nice.
AI tools out there now. Just the it's hard to overstate like how much more efficient it's made me at operating my business. And I think that's going to translate to local media operators.
Nice.
So for the marketing example, I think they'll be able to do their reporting, have enough time to also take on these clients, the real estate
Mhm.
brokerage in town that wants some branded work done. And also get a spot in the newspaper that week or whatever. I think there's gonna
Yeah.
be more options. I don't think we know what it's gonna enable, but I'm just seeing it in my own business and my own like tinkering around with these tools. I'm like, oh, there's all kinds of things possible now that I did not have the time or bandwidth to take on before.
Yeah, and I like that. It's also sort of the making good a little bit on the promise of like it's not just efficiencies. It's not just
Hmm.
making you a little bit faster or a little bit or a lot faster or whatever. And, piling those on and hopefully getting time back to do whatever. All that's happening, I would hope. But also, it's like, wait a minute, what can we do now that we just simply couldn't do before?
Hmm.
And, branded content isn't reinventing the wheel, but for these publications where like I said, everything's existential. Like that's a big move. And now
Hmm.
they finally don't need, to hire a whole different team and a whole different set of software to do it. Which is, feels like progress to me. Also, what resonated with me there is like certainly, yeah, a lot of that distrust of AI that stems from it's kind of I wouldn't call it perfectly analogous to social media, but the distribution side of it, because
Hmm.
AI is obviously vastly affecting distribution and digital discovery, and that's indisputable. But also, its use as a tool is also indisputable. So it's kind of like, well, you can acknowledge how good it is at making certain things better in your workflows, while still also acknowledging, yes, it is it is like really doing something strange to audience, and now that they're sort of getting AI summaries and stopping. So it's I guess it's broadly, it's just a don't throw the baby out with the bathwater argument, but um, I feel like that's sort of where journalists end up for some reason. Um, I don't know if that you're seeing that change at all as it's sort of becoming more embedded. I would say on my end, I'm seeing over the last 5 to 6 months more of from the skeptics a little bit more of a resignation that this is happening.
I've seen,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Sorry, I interrupted. I was going to say
no,
I
no,
felt the exact same way a year ago. If I'd seen some AI headline in the industry, in the local news industry, somebody
Mhm.
using it for something, there would have been a ton of backlash and just shaming and people piling on. And yeah, 5 6 months this year, I'd say there's been. I feel like I've seen a marked shift in the mood of the
Mm,
industry of people. Yeah, whether it be resigning or just maybe they're just getting more familiar with it, realizing what it can and can't do and just becoming aware of it. But the mood is the vibe has shifted, Pete. Um,
yeah,
from what I
not
could tell, yeah,
not to complete like, hey, it's awesome, but to like, okay, like this is kind of getting embedded.
yeah, yeah.
Um, since I touched on it, let's talk about the AI disintermediation distribution, what it's doing. Do you have a sense of what are the unique factors in there of like how local media is affected by this? I would think intuitively that they're probably a little less affected because you're a little more invested in your own community stuff goings on and you want to go to like the source of it. But I don't know. Like, you tell me, or what are you hearing in terms of like, how badly the Google Zero or the traffic apocalypse is for local media?
I think in terms of trust, it's actually a really good thing for local news
Okay.
because people are just they're you know inundated with content coming at them now, and
Hmm.
I think if there is a local trusted voice, um, I think that people are going to turn to that more and more, and that human connection, like a human byline that they can actually read. That being said, the local media operators still need to um, they still need to pull that off. Kind of what I was talking about before: brand building, trust building. Not everybody has that down. A lot of folks that
Yeah.
I talk to, honestly, think they can keep doing what they've always done. We've got our website up. We've got this new our masthead for 50 years. people trust that, and it's just not the case anymore. You still need
Yeah.
to, you need to be on social. You need to be everywhere also at the same
Yeah.
time.
Well,
And
AI can help with that too.
it's true, it can, but it's just, it's a dance of
Yeah.
folks that don't want to change, people that are changing, and like the opportunity, the people that get it, realize that it's gonna, yeah, I think it's gonna be a good thing, because
Yeah.
the slop is ridiculous out there. The AI slop. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about slop specifically for local. And
Hmm.
it's interesting. I find every few months there's some kind of story about someone trying to game the system with local. It feels like
Hmm.
maybe I don't know. I'm exaggerating on like a few different incidents, but it does feel like that. It feels like a year ago, I forget what it was called, but there was the guy that was eventually hired by 6 a.m. City who was doing.
Hmm.
Now that wasn't necessarily like malicious. I think there was a certain amount of, again, I'm not speaking as a scholar on that particular story, but it sounds like there's a mix of people kind of trying things out who aren't really journalists and are just kind of like throwing content out there that's locally oriented. And then there's this more recent thing in Florida where there was this sort of fake site, and that sounds like it was a little bit
Hmm.
more shady, and he was actually running a whole bunch of other ones. And again, it's all like financial scam type stuff. But I do feel like local media just this sort of keeps happening. Like, and I think maybe it's because that people feel like they can do something on local sites and it's sort of under the radar or whatever, as opposed
Yeah.
to trying to do some fake national site, which probably wouldn't get very far. So, like, is that basically it? Is that what people are trying to do? Or is there some kind of unique, perfect storm of circumstance that is fueling this?
Yeah. I think that is a thing. You see those headlines pop up. I think it's two different things.
Mhm.
One is, like the story down in Florida is more malicious. It's referred to as pink slime. I'm sure if you've heard
Right.
that term or not. The pink
Yeah.
slime sites are basically, like a website that looks like a legitimate news operation that is funded by some kind of organization with a goal, usually a political operative type people or something like that. But they're playing it off as, reliable local journalism, and then just slander one political party or the other's candidates. So there's that going on with weird funding that nobody can really trace underneath it. On the other side, at the same time, there's been a huge, um, kind of trend I've just seen on YouTube and some podcasts of people getting really interested in like local newsletters. Specifically, there's been some huge
Mm.
success stories where people are like, I run this local newsletter now, I make $400,000 a year, and
Well,
which
your
has
friend
happened.
on Substack, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's happened, but there's been a lot of people interested in that and content popping up around it. And with the rise of AI tools making stuff easy, there's just a lot of people, I think, in their basements throwing spaghetti at the wall.
Mm.
And just I can spin up 15 local newsletters with zero, where I'm just ripping off the actual local news outlet and link and copying their stuff and putting it up there. So I think it's those two things are the main
Right.
kind of culprits. And there
All it
are
takes is
legitimate
yeah.
people doing that, like the local curated events newsletters too. That it's not as simple as good and bad. There's quality people. My friend TJ Larkin, I was just on his podcast. He's kind of in that space, and he puts out a really quality product and
Mm.
teaches other people how to do it and everything. So, I think it's those two. If that kind of answers the question from my
Yeah,
standpoint,
yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Let's switch gears as we wrap up here because we're both podcasters and you've obviously written both about um podcasting and what its relevance to local media. So where does it um where does it factor into a local news strategy? Obviously people like podcasts, but they're harder to scale. Is that less true now? And, where does what's a good podcast growth strategy for local news in 2026?
That's one of the reasons I zoned in on this a few years ago. Podcasts are notoriously hard to reliably grow, and when they do
Mhm.
grow, it's almost hard to figure out why, without like some viral moments or something like that. If you start a podcast up about, you know, World War II in the Pacific Theater or something like that,
Hmm.
it's hard to find audiences. It's hard to find first party data. The difference that I've seen, and this does take a little bit of a budget with local podcasts in particular, is that particularly a site I use called Audio Go. Not sure if you're familiar with that.
Hmm.
It's a advertising platform that allows you to create 15 and 30-second ads, basically audio ads, place them on the top podcast networks and Pandora and a few other things like that. But the key is you can geo-target them by zip code, or yes, zip code,
Hmm.
the 5-digit one. I get area code and zip code mixed up. um,
Be
so
creepy if they
base
were targeting my exact house or block.
right,
So I'm
right.
glad it's just the 5-digit one.
Yeah. I've seen some success, and this is particularly a local podcast thing. If you can communicate your message well in a 30-second spot, like, hey, this is the Montrose Daily Press podcast covering in your town, the news and events, geo-target that to everybody listening to the Daily or the top true crime podcasts and geo-target it. I've seen some good, I haven't seen anything else work that well as that kind of strategy with general podcasting in general. Like your podcast and my podcast don't work like that. You're on
Mm,
AI, I'm on local media, but to the whole country, it's harder to
sure,
target those people. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the
totally.
edge that I've seen, and feel free anybody to use that who's out there, a local operator. It does. That's kind of the secret sauce we've been kind of using. Yeah.
Nice. Sure, everyone's got their notebooks out right now. But yeah, it sounds like a great service.
Yeah.
Like I say, I try to end these conversations on a similar question because we see divergent futures ahead of us with AI involved. There's going to be bad. There's going to be good. So tell me, like, what is something that might keep you up at night with regard to AI and media, and what's something you're hopeful about?
So for something that keeps me up at night is the pace of change is relentless and hard to. It's really hard for me to see what anything's going to look like in 2 or 3 years, let alone 6 months from now. So I've been, over the moon with some of the capabilities I can do now, like with Claude Code. I've finished, I've been working on a software platform for my company for 2.5 years, had it about 10% done. I have finished it in the last 2 months. It is
Nice.
operational. People are on the platform.
What's the
I have this,
platform? Tell me about it.
so it's my LocalPod studio. It's basically a dashboard studio where you can turn written content into an AI narrated podcast, fully distributed in a couple clicks. So yeah,
Nice.
free. Thanks for the free shout out there. Anybody wants to check
That
that out, go to localpod.co or message me. But
beautiful.
the thing that keeps me up at night is I built this incredible. I have a little bit of coding ability, not much, minor league, and I've been able to build this crazy thing, and I have all these other ideas I can build, but I'm at the same time, I'm like, that means anybody can build this. So
Mhm.
I think it's a great equalizer, a great democratizing force. So I'm excited and optimistic that I can build stuff and do stuff for my business. The competition is going to come with that. I think it's still early, and combine all that with I don't know what anything the whole economy is going to look like in a couple of years. Because you
Yeah.
can't map what that growth is going to look like. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question? That's what keeps
Well,
me
you
up
kind
at
of
night.
almost mixed it in there, but there
Okay.
is also what are you hopeful about?
Yeah, so it's really, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing. I'm optimistic. There are doomers. There's a lot of doomerism around AI. I don't think AI is sentient. I don't think it's going to get there. When you
Yeah.
actually dig in and see how it actually works, it's a very powerful tool. I don't think it's going to murder all of us. I just don't see it in the cards, or a very small chance at least. And I
Yeah,
think it's
people can tell it to do bad things, but it doesn't have any
yes.
ideas of its own.
No. There's
Yeah.
no ghost in the machine.
Agreed.
Is my take on it, and I think that I think it's a new industrial revolution. I don't think that's underselling it at all. I don't. People worry about all the jobs disappearing, and every time people have said that in like recorded history, you go read about it. There are new things you couldn't even imagine that could be jobs that are going to replace it. Real quick, I graduated high school in 2003. I'm 41 years old. My job title today, I am a podcast producer and business, and I'll just say podcast producer, SaaS platform owner, and we operate an Airbnb, my wife and I, upstairs.
Nice.
None of that existed when I graduated high school in 2003. If I said I was an Airbnb host and podcast producer, I would have been like locked up basically. And that was, a little over 2 decades ago. So, things change. I think there's a future of abundance, and I think it's going to help us unlock that. And there's some issues with it, but I think they're going to get sorted out because it's worth it to sort it out. Yeah.
That's awesome. We'll leave it there. Paul, thank you so much for dropping by the Media Copilot and sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, this was fun, Pete. I always enjoy these talks. Gets me fired up. So thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Cool. We'll do it again soon.
Cool. All right.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Paul Gewuerz, host of Small Press, Big Ideas. The Media Copilot is a podcast, so please follow or subscribe to us on whatever platform you're listening to us on. If you're on Spotify or Apple, please leave a 5-star review and a note about what you like. And if you're on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. All of those things really do help the show because they put the podcast in front of more people. The Media Copilot is produced by Muso Media. Look for their link in the show notes, and don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter as well. Thanks again for being here. Seeing you in the future.